Whew, okay, been a while since I've done a recording in the bedroom, so let's try it. It's time for me to be honest with myself. When I look back at my videos on this channel, I see a common thread for a lot of what I do. And when I looked at that, I didn't necessarily like what I saw, which is that the body of work that I've done is largely the work of a pessimistic person, maybe even a fatalistically pessimistic person. Part of that is, look, it's kind of fun to look at the ways in which things just aren't working and maybe can't work and pick at the scab a little bit. The other part of it is that when I started doing this, it was early 2021, Christmas had just been cancelled, and I wasn't exactly in the frame of mind to express positivity to the audience, such that it was at the time, because I would have had like a few hundred subscribers from posting my old VODs from Twitch. Things have changed, and I wanted to mark that change with this video, which in fairness, patrons voted for the topic, so thanks to them for letting me do this at a time when it actually feels kind of right to do it. There was a brief period among the channels that I follow on here where they would describe their utopian visions for how society ought to be, and I really liked that. It was refreshing to see people with a bright spark in their eyes about the world that could be, but I wasn't quite there yet. The truth is that I was quite what people would call black-pilled about the world and politics. Maybe not completely, but it was definitely there. I also ended up watching videos during one of my late-night YouTube browsings between the Paradox games and the history videos. It was one about revolutionary optimism, and that was interesting to me. This video is not going to be about either my personal view of utopianism or revolutionary optimism, because I don't really have anything to add on that topic, and I think offering a vision of utopia wouldn't be what I want this particular video to be about. I kind of want to get specific and personal and narrow it down a little as to why I'm an optimist and why we might generally need optimism as leftists, and what the basis is for my rejection of the black pill with regards to the incredibly normal island that I find myself trapped on. And you know, I am cursed to be trapped on it, at least for now. This video is going to be a bit of a mix, part thoughts about the big concept, part personal reflection, part channel update even, and honestly a big part of it will probably be a reflection of what I'm feeling right now. How am I doing? Is it good? I think it might be, but let's figure that part out, I guess. Somewhat counterintuitively, for a video about why I'm an optimist, we're going to be looking exactly at what the bad things are in the UK. In fairness, this could never be an exhaustive list, and probably the things I choose to highlight will depend on when I wrote this part of the script, although it turns out I didn't really script a lot of this in the end because I'll explain in a little bit, don't worry, I will explain myself on the scripting a bit later. So, you've been warned, this isn't exhaustive, but if you do think of more bad things about the UK, aside from the obvious jibes about what we consider to be Chinese food, because I will be defending that with my dying breath, Chinese food and the wool, those are the only products of the UK I will ever defend. Things I won't defend, though, are what we actually need to talk about here. Really the source of my malaise, an origin point not just for this channel, but the stream I do over on Twitch, which you should check out and follow, is that infamous night, December 12th, 2019. And I know, it's not cool to be invested in what happened then. It's cringe, it's sour grapes, it's all of that stuff, but it is the truth. When it feels personal, like the country you live in has told you to go fuck yourself, it kinda sucks. To suggest that that result is ground zero for the pessimism that was going on, though, isn't strictly correct. A lot of things that I'll point to have their origin in the coalition government of 2010 to 2015, or even New Labour, or just big global events that this little island that I live on has a minimal potential to impact. That being said, it is the event that caused this sort of deep malaise within my political thought. You can go back and see the videos I did when I was in the middle of that, and really, really in the middle of that. It didn't look like there was a way out of it. The very first video I did was a product of that. It was lashing out at a group that I felt had gone underanalyzed and undercriticized and had caused the results that I was unhappy about. I stand by that video, by the way. It's still my most popular on here by some margin, and it was peak pandemic vibes. It was an outlet, but it set in motion a trend, which was that pointing out and detailing the bad thing was what I wanted to do here. And I remember a friend of the channel, John Duncan, whose videos you should go check out. He proofread that original script and wrote a note about the conclusion where he was like, well, you don't really have a conclusion, you should probably do one, right? And I ended up going with, sometimes it's fun to point and laugh at people getting mad online, and that kind of became it, right? So what is the more recent pessimism that's taken a hold of me and a lot of other people? Well, if you live in the UK, I'd invite you to just look around your local town or city. That'll probably be enough, but perhaps surprisingly, most of the audience of this channel apparently doesn't live in the UK. So you'll probably need a bit more explanation as to what exactly is happening right now that makes pessimism so easy and attractive. Let's start with the thing that everyone is dealing with. It's the old cost of living crisis. It's not necessarily unique to the UK among comparable economies, but the UK has some pretty high inflation going on right now. Part of this isn't exactly the fault of Britain as such. The amount of control Britain had over Russia invading Ukraine, causing both energy and food prices to go up globally, is admittedly somewhat limited. The things we did have control over, however, we really fucked up. For example, privatization of nearly every aspect of our energy sector pretty much meant we were screwed coming and going. Plus the fact that so much of British food is grown in greenhouses means that food prices are pretty directly tied to energy prices. There's a pretty good Tom Nicholas video on the privatization of energy and how insane the UK experiment with that is. You should check it out after this video, it will be in the description. And before people go, oh well, food was cheap in the UK before, that didn't stop fucking food banks from existing, did it? It's not like we were a utopian paradise where everyone was getting their fucking needs met. I guess I really did talk about utopia a bit in this video. But the point is that the UK was shit before the cost of living crisis. Now it's managed to be prohibitively expensive and shit. I mean, there are pubs selling £5 pints outside of London now. Do you know how badly you have to fuck the British economy that there are now £5 pints being sold outside of London? Oh god, I'm dying in this heat. I chose to record this during a heat wave, which is why you're getting a blast of my chest hair right now. But getting mad about Britain in the middle of a heat wave in Britain is it's challenging. It's challenging. Moving on to my absolute favourite mode of transportation, British trains. My opinion on trains is pretty well documented because every time I get a train in the UK, I complain about it on Twitter because the trains here are a force of nature. It's incredible to me that Britain is so ruthlessly dedicated to taking something that could be good, which they invented, by the way, and making it a literal Lovecraftian horror to deal with. I swear it's like playing fucking Call of Cthulhu trying to get anywhere that isn't London. In fact, the government's rail regulators just announced that they're shortening the window in which you can get cheap tickets. And by cheap, I don't actually mean cheap. No, it would still cost me about 2.5 weeks of food shopping to go from Nottingham to Reading and back again. Which is a journey I have to make sometimes. And it's a journey of about 127 miles or 204 kilometers if you use real units. And if you look at comparable journey lengths in other European countries for a return journey, it comes to much less. So much less, with a lot less of the shitty service too. UK trains are so expensive and shit that people are choosing to fly between London and Edinburgh. We have an expanding domestic flight industry, while the planet is literally burning alive because we refuse to make the thing that could be really good, like, barely adequate. We can't even make it adequate. And I mean, flying is literally the shittiest method of transport imaginable. Whether it's the absurd security theatre at the airports, the constant delays, the fact that flying in a cylinder thousands of feet above the ground is inherently terrifying, because if one thing goes wrong, you are definitely going to die. It's over. You're done. Can you tell I'm afraid of flying and hate airports? But that's preferable to people in the UK than having to confront using the train. That's what it's come to. As if that's not enough, even if you decide not to travel around the country, the house you stay in, probably super expensive unless you've paid off your mortgage, in which case you are probably among the 15 or so people in the UK who have some spare cash. So, there's a Patreon, the link will be in the description. You should, if you have some spare cash and want to help me deal with my very expensive rent situation, please feel free. You'll get the videos early. Well, at least one of the videos, and get into the Discord. You can see the super secret bit where I say all of my very, very salacious things. Ooh, really tempted you with that one, didn't I? Look, if you're not one of these people who owns their house, your rent has probably gone up for the mold-infested shoebox you live in, or your mortgage's variable rate is about to change, and oh, would you look at that, interest rates are still rising, even though they can't actually solve the particular issue with inflation we're having, which is a supply shock and price gouging. So what we're actually doing is punishing the poorest people for something totally out of their control. Again, like we always do. Isn't that great? Doesn't that just warm the heart? Ultimately, though, all of these things could be fixable, or at least we could begin to change them. Traditionally, in a democratic system, we would be able to put pressure on, say, the government to get on with actually fixing these things. But we've had what I would call a big year for government. We've gone from Boris Johnson to Queenslayer Liz Truss, who's now stealing bathrobes from Taiwanese hotels, to Prime Minister Nerd himself, Rishi Sunak, who seems determined to do nothing. At least if he can help it. And while he's doing nothing, one of his most prominent ministers is going around bleating about stopping the boats over and over again, because ultimately they have nothing to offer people. They have run out of road and they fucking know it. So now the only pressure they're receptive to is that of a largely fictional man from Kent who's angry about the boats, which is a crude way to describe people so desperate that they're coming to the UK. I mean, just imagine how fucking shit what you're fleeing from must be if the UK is where you're going to for a better life. Incidentally, there's nothing illegal about taking a boat across the channel to seek asylum in the UK, but that hasn't stopped us going full 19th century and bringing back prison ships. Yeah, it's going well. The other pressure they're receptive to is that of people who don't really have any actual problems. The people in their 40s and above who are obsessed with university free speech, which is weird. You are literally a full adult and yet you're appointing a director for freedom of speech and academic freedom, which is a made-up job that amounts to 40-plus-year-old man who looks like his life took a turn for the worse after being fired from The Apprentice, who could only get joy in allowing the harassment of, and let's be honest about it, trans people, because that's who this is really targeting in a lot of cases. I'm sorry to harp on about it, but seriously, imagine being above the age of 23 and still giving a shit about cancel culture. Okay, you're a really serious person about free speech, but I don't see you advocating for making slaps, which are strategic lawsuits against public participation, more difficult for, say, an extremely wealthy billionaire whose go-to move is to sue randoms on the internet in order to silence criticism of her. I've not named any names. You can infer who you like from that. And you might be sitting there thinking, okay, well, the government of the UK is fucked. The easy thing to do would be to simply replace them with the other party. Well, let me introduce you to Sir Keir Starmer KC, a man who looks and sounds like a ham that's been cursed by Nurgle. The sins of this man are far too many to rattle off in rant format, but you know what? For the sake of your enjoyment and entertainment, I'm going to do my best. He immediately, upon receiving slight pressure, caved to transphobe demands. He's ditched pretty much every pledge he's made that got him elected as leader. He's U-turned on almost every policy area, cynically wielded a minority community's fears to pursue a factional agenda to exclude anyone to the left of Gordon Brown from politics. He openly tolerates to the point that he may as well endorse anti-black and Islamophobic politicians within his own ranks. Has refused to say whether he'll repeal legislation that allows basically all protests to be criminalized, and to top it all off, he has the charisma of a skid mark. Really, Keir Starmer deserves his own video because he's such a consequential politician, but that's what you're getting for now. So, yeah, it's a lot. And as I mentioned, even if you're sincerely or otherwise done with electoral politics, it's pretty much guaranteed that if you take to the streets, you're facing arrest. I mean, we had that happen at the coronation of the giant-eared king we now have to deal with, which is curious for an institution that a lot of people claim has no formal power for it to be backed up by police thuggery. If only someone had done a video about this. It's me. I'm someone. I did the video. Go check it out. It's really good fun. Okay, let's take a beat here. That's a non-exhaustive but pretty bad situation, right? It might even feel like the worst is yet to come. So why be invested in doing anything about it or feel like things might get better? The thing is that there's this attitude that has to an extent taken a hold of people that I quite like. It even took a bit of a hold of me. It's best summarized in this tweet, which talks about coming back from the centrist rally, and people chanting better things aren't possible, which, yeah, I mean, you know, they've nailed them. 10 out of 10 tweet. 1st of July 2017 too. Jesus Christ, I can't believe I can summon that tweet into my head in the year of our Lord 2023. To be clear, I'm not calling anyone I like a centrist, because when I say centrist, I do mean it as a slur. But there is a hint of this, maybe a bit more than a hint, that can creep into the mind when all you're presented with is, well, isn't it all fucked? That's not to say you shouldn't, if you're a content creator who's politically minded, talk about the bad things, even though this is supposed to be a video about a shift in my own mentality and hopefully the channel's attitude. We're still going to do this occasionally. We're still going to look at the thing that's fucked and point at it and say, that's kind of fucked, right? Like, that is going to happen. It's just that I feel like I'm doing you a disservice by not being a bit more open, at least in the videos, to the possibility that things can get better. And why do we need that, though? Things are so bad and so terrible. Why is it that we need optimism in the face of all the things that are happening? I mean, America looks like this because of the Canadian wildfires that were happening, maybe still are happening. It's a lot to take in and a lot to overcome. But that's just it. We need to believe that we can overcome it. It may not always work. When I tell you about the things that make me an optimist, I'm going to mention things that did not succeed, or maybe were partial successes, or even had the chance to succeed, but, you know, we haven't been able to figure out whether they have or not, because it's too soon to tell. But as in our personal lives, in our political lives, we need to believe to some extent that it can get better. Because the alternative is to just sort of lay down and take what's coming to us. And I'm not sure that's an idea that's compatible with the worldview that I profess to hold, or the worldview that you all are likely to have in the audience. I don't think people click on a video that says a case for optimism and do that because they don't have an instinctive desire to want things to get better and that there might be viable paths to do that. I wish I could smash cut to me checking the comments and it's just full of nitpickers and people telling me it's all hopeless. You know, why am I offering false hope? Because I just know there'll be at least one. But surprise me, everyone. Go into the comments and tell me something that gives you some optimism. It could be anything. Just feel free to do that. And, you know, maybe it'll help me keep this sort of positive vibe going. Even though my delivery, I bet, feels very flat. But that is, I promise, a function of this fucking heat wave that's not going away. Gee, I wonder if there's some kind of problem. No, I'm doing it again. Nope. I stopped myself. What we can't do, and what isn't part of the case for optimism, is blind optimism. I can't just smile reassuringly at the camera and tell you everything's going to be fine, don't worry about it. One, because that would be a lie, and I don't know that everything's going to be fine. And two, I don't think I know how to smile reassuringly at the camera. It'll come off as fake, and you'll know I'm bullshitting you from that alone. I mean, you can tell I look dead in the eyes as I'm doing this. Oh, this looks. I can see myself on like the recording capture. I look super awkward doing that. I should probably stop. The point of optimism isn't that things will just work out, though, if you sit there going through the motions. It's that there's a viable path that we can take to make it work out. So to borrow a little bit from those videos I mentioned in my intro, we need an actual material basis on which to believe that things are going to get better. Instead of having a person with an eerily large smile and dead eyes tell us that things can only get better, my source of optimism might have, a slight bit of this element of faith in it, but I didn't just magically feel better because there was sunshine and green leaves this year. It did come from something, and marching through my bleakest days, which handily I did document on here, may well have been what I needed all along. As an aside, I look back at those early videos, and I don't fully recognize the person on the other side. Not just because there are some very stupid costumes or they're in my old flat, but because those videos show an attitude that maybe I've grown a bit beyond because of those things. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's me looking back at myself, so I know what I was like at the time. Anyway, okay, not the point of the video. The point is that optimism is good. Actually, it lets us keep our eyes on the horizon and imagine the good things that could be. We don't have to dwell on the mistakes of the past. Just learn from them and try and do better. That's why when I finally get to some of these good things, the things that make me optimistic, there will be things that didn't succeed, and they'll be there for a good reason, I promise. I want to try and take this on chronologically, which is going to be hard because I'm kind of winging this section, because I tried to script this, and this is my explanation for this scripting issue. I tried to script this, and it ended up being basically impossible for me to script this. And I felt like the best bet was to just try and improvise and be direct and be honest. So while this is not going to be strictly chronological, I know what my start point is, and I know approximately what my end point is. So we'll give it a go. But it's probably not going to be. So we're going to start in the deep past, the distant year of 2015. I was 21 then. Time has flown by, but it's also been an eternity. The summer of 2015 felt a lot like the summer of 2023. I suppose it's a source of frustration that it's been 8 years, and if you were just looking at it as discrete points, we're just in the same place, but I'm 8 years older and everything's more expensive. I do think a lot about the experience I had from 2015 to 2019, when there felt like there may have been a shortcut available. We may have found the one weird trick. And I can hear you now saying, aha, got you, that shit didn't work out, did it? No, it didn't. And a lot of what the channel's about is kind of figuring out why it didn't work. Or at least trying to figure out what the arguments that were being made that sort of didn't actually fully explain it. If that's kind of what the videos I did on agrocentrism, echo chambers, civility politics, and that one about sensibles was about. It was about the arguments that people were making that didn't actually make sense and explain what happened. That aside, the source of optimism related to this is the people that I was able to make common cause with, who I might never have otherwise found out I had common cause with. It's hard to explain how alone you can feel when all you have are your thoughts and the rants you do at the pub, as I did age 21, because I was, I guess, born 40 years old. So by the time I was doing that, I was in my 60s. While the band has kind of broken up, as it was always going to do eventually, I'm still making common cause with a lot of those people, and that's good, I think. There's talent and passion and people who are going out and doing a lot of interesting, good work that I don't really, and I don't really consider myself a part of that. This channel was mostly sort of extended length shitposts, but a lot of other people really put their shoulder to the wheel in great ways, and most of the ones I think of were people who I encountered through that 2015-2019 moment. And to be honest, you wouldn't have this channel without all that, so I'm kind of okay with the failure, because we tried, and we tripped over our dicks in front of everyone, and that was embarrassing and it sucked, and bad things have happened since, but at least we're not alone, you know? And I suppose I should try and be, making my way through the chronology here. So let's jump a little bit more recent. And a lot of what I've mentioned have been the culmination of long-term trends coming to a head. And you might think that there's been no reaction to some of these things, or at least very little reaction. But that's not true. There's been plenty of positive activists and other actions against these things that we can draw optimism from. They annoy people, but I think about Just Stop Oil. And their choice of targets can be baffling for people, and people always love to do the whole, oh, well, I wouldn't have picked this target. And to which I'd say, but surely the fact that they're going out and doing this, even if the reaction a lot of the time has been very, very negative. I'll throw up a few headlines here about what's been happening to some Just Stop Oil protesters. The fact that they're going out there and they're trying, if you think you can do it better, the fact that they're going out there and they're trying really does clear a path for you to go out there and show us how it's done. And I hope you do, and I hope you succeed, because the cause is righteous, to be honest. And I'm still in awe of the time that they interrupted the snooker, which is not like a thing that has like a huge mainstream popularity, I guess. But they just poured the orange powder on it, and the next day the commentators were like, well, told you that we were important. Which seems like a great protesting tactic, is to just flatter the people that you're sort of inconveniencing. I also think about the activist group Palestine Action, who are occupying the factories of Elbit, which is a Israeli weapons manufacturer that operates out of the UK. They are trying to get their sites closed, and they have had a surprising degree of success now. Of course, it's being the UK. They have also had to go to court an awful lot, but the things that they do and the risks that they are willing to take for a cause that, in my view, is incredibly righteous, is in a sense very inspiring. And it's incredible to me that they actually put themselves at risk like this in a really, really quite important act of solidarity. Then I kind of turned to the cost of living crisis that looms large in my head. There was a group called Don't Pay. Now, they wanted to organise mass non-payment of energy bills, and that was kind of an idea that people looked at with a lot of skepticism. But the fact that there was quite a significant uptake in it, now admittedly this is in the context of there being a cost of living crisis, not paying your energy bill, probably, not having to pay as much for it, probably quite good, quite a salient issue. And admittedly there may have been a little tiny bit of fuckery that caused some problems there. But again, the point of all of these is, while they have varying degrees of success, I mean, I don't think we've stopped all oil production in the UK. I don't think that the apartheid system in Israel has been dismantled, and I don't think energy prices have really come down significantly since Don't Pay has existed, which is a great shame, because, the British people, they did get bought by a very, very weak energy price cap. But at least the government kind of had to buy the British people off for that. Not very effective purchasing and kind of cheap, as a lot of things were once here, but, at least they felt compelled to buy off the British people with a price cap. But the point of those groups that I mentioned is that there is always a need for people to get the ball rolling and to take inspiration from them. And look, this relates back to the channel and to my role, because people will immediately turn around and say, hey, this is all real interesting. What are you doing? And as much as you need people to get the ball rolling, you need people to talk about the things that are getting the ball to roll. And look, different people have different capacities, different abilities, different talent for different things, right? this might be what I'm good at in terms of offering something to people. And as much as I don't necessarily love that that's the case, I feel like part of this optimism turn is that I want to actually make these cases for people and show you that the ball is actually rolling a little bit. Admittedly, it might be a bit like Sisyphus and we get the ball to the top and it rolls all the way back down, but let's get it to the top first and then we can figure that bit out, right? I also, just before we carry on, I do also want to mention that there have been immigration raid resistances that have had a lot of success stopping people from getting deported from the UK, which is a huge, 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 huge deal at the moment because the government is like cracking down horribly on basically anyone who's not white British, but sort of like not the main part of it here, but they are really cracking down on people that they desperately want to deport because they have nothing to offer people. And then, you know, look, it's superficial. We shouldn't buy into individuals, but there is something and someone that I want to shout out, which is Mick Lynch routinely humiliating journalists. It's great. One, humiliating British journalists is always morally correct. You should always be doing that. Two, you know, there is a thing, a lesson to draw from that, which is, as much as the 2015 moment emerged from a completely complacent and unprepared media political atmosphere, they've refused to learn anything. They're still completely unprepared and they will make mistakes. So openings, not necessarily in the same place, but they will open up for us. I think that is absolutely true. And I don't know if I made my case well. I've winged it quite seriously in this bit of the script, but I hope it made some sense to you all. And I'm just gonna power through it now and get to try and wrap this up in a neat-ish way. All right, look, I'm gonna be upfront about it. Not sure I nailed that last bit. I didn't necessarily stick the landing, but this is maybe a chance for me to correct some of that in a conclusionary way. So look, this was always going to be kind of a personal video because I can only express the things that I see and observe and where I get that understanding of optimism from, right? You will have your own things that you look to. I could only really provide examples of things that I look to, and maybe those examples aren't very good. Maybe they're great, maybe they're just average and everyone else is thinking the same things. Do feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm going to be particularly responsive on this video because it is personal. And if you want to tell me that I'm wrong and that, like, you know, optimism sucks, I don't know, maybe you do want to tell me that, then you should feel free to, and we'll do the old dialogue in the comments for it. But I'm aware this video took a bit longer than I promised to come out, so I have to say I'm sorry about that. I probably should have apologized in the intro and not in the bit that barely anyone gets to, but it is what it is now, I'm afraid. I want to also thank... Wow, I'm really nailing this. Let's try that line again. I'm going to leave that in so that you understand how difficult this is for me in the conditions I'm working in. I want to thank my patrons who have been so patient with all of this stuff, with all the delays and all of the nonsense going on. But I especially want to thank Drone Riff, Mercutio, Kazushida, John N, and SMD. They are the top tier subscribers for this month. Please, if you enjoy this video, if you enjoy any of the other videos, please consider going to the Patreon. You get at least one video a month early at the lowest tier. You get access to the VIP area of the Discord. The link for the Discord will be in the Linktree thing that I'm going to post in the description down below. And really, you get to tell me what to do. It's kind of like the opposite of what British journalists say. They say no one tells me what to write. Well, you very explicitly can tell me what to write. You get early drafts of the scripts when they're actually scripts and not like this one, a bit of a garbled mess at times. You get outlines of the big videos. You get much more detailed scheduling information. You also, you can get the shout out in the video and you get your name up on the screen like those lovely people have now. But everyone, it's time for me to go, and it's time for the channel to kind of grow up a little bit, I guess. Although, to be fair, this summer we're going to have some really interesting videos. So do like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all on the next one. See ya.